What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 430. Yes, this is actually number 430. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources.
What do you mean actually?
Joining me on the line, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, why did you do that?
Do what?
You're such a troll. Luis actually went into our show notes and doctored them so that I would accidentally say episode 430 on the show last week, and it totally worked on me too. What is wrong with you?
That sounds like a lot of effort for very unclear payoff.
I agree with that sentiment. This is actually episode number 430. Last week was 429. And this week we've got the Rivals of Ixalan block sealed episode. That's right. If you're planning on heading out to a PPTQ or even a Grand Prix or any real local tournaments of any measure, will usually start things out with a sealed tournament. And we're going to be diving deep on sealed. I've been doing a bunch of them and letting you know exactly what's up with this particular format. It's a pretty cool one, too. Before we get into all that, though, channelfireball.com, that's the place to go for all the things you need magic-related on the internet. They've been the sponsor of the show for quite a while now, and we love our partnership with Channel Fireball because they are a like-minded company. They want to help you out. Of course, they want to sell you cards, too. I mean, you can buy your cards while you're there, but, dude, go to the website, and you'll see a bunch of awesome free content right on the front page. No charge. You can just watch the videos. You can just read the articles. As many of you want, you can go back in time and see old draft videos and formats, and it's all for free right on the front page. And while you're there, hey, pick up the sealed stuff you need, any packs or boxes or anything like that, or any singles you need from Rivals of Ixalan or any other set. They're going to have it at Channel Fireball, and they're going to take care of you. So please do help the show out by checking out channelfireball.com. Also, patreon.com. That's a place that you can go to support the show directly if you like what we're doing over here, if you feel like you've gotten something out of Limited Resources and you'd like to give back, that's a place to do it. Patreon.com/Limited Resources. All the information's right there. Next week, we're going to be doing a giveaway. Ooh, Luis, I forgot to tell you this, but I will tell you it now. So a couple of things happened. I found a bunch of extra rares that I'm just going to throw into the giveaway. So it's ready. The pile is nice and tall, and it's ready to go. And also, a good listener of ours named Justin, who I met at GP Memphis over the course of the weekend, said, look, I love the show. I'm not on the Patreon. Can't really afford it right now. I said, no problem. Totally understand. But he said, but I do want to give back, and this is how I'm going to do it. And I thought this is so cool. He gave me a Sword of Light and Shadow from, what is it from? Fifth Dawn?
That would be Dark Steel.
Dark Steel. And he just gave me one and said, this, you can do what you want. And I said, well, we're throwing it in the thing. He's like, great. So we're throwing it in the giveaway. I've got a Sword of Light and Shadow along with all the other rares, and we're going to be doing that next week.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's sweet, right? Really nice of him. I thought that was super cool. And how do you get in? How do you become eligible for it? You just have to be a patron. That's it. Any patron is
any
eligible.
Patron or co-host is eligible, I believe.
Any patron is eligible, and that's it. Now, one of the other things you get is a Patreon question of the week. We will ask. I will do a thread every month or two, updating it where people can put their questions in. We pick out one per week. And then also, which we'll be doing soon as well, are the listener Q&As, and we get our questions from our patrons. That's a whole entire episode, kind of a mailbag style episode where you get to throw a bunch of questions at us, and we'll do our best to answer them.
Coming up on one of those pretty soon.
Yeah, I think it could be next week. It might even be next week's show. But yeah, and so if you want to get in ahead of that as well, if you have a burning question that you've been dying to ask, that's the place to do it. This one comes from Christina, who says, hey guys, my friends and I will be playing Team Limited at Columbus at the GP April 27th.
To be clear, that was Marshall saying it wrong, not the Patreon user writing it wrong.
Thank you, Luis, yes. And CFP lists it as being Dominaria. We played in the Cleveland Team Limited GP last year for Amonkhet and bought a few boxes and had plenty of time to test and practice. This time we get pre-release weekend, and that's it. How helpful will it be to sit down with the card lists once they've been fully spoiled and just talk it out? We'll most likely have a rare and mythic rare set review to compare our thoughts to. And sealed is a bit different on top of that. Thanks for all the work you guys do. It's much appreciated and enjoyed. Thank you, Christina. So this is an interesting one, Luis. It's hard to say no to this, right?
Well, okay, so yes, it will be helpful to do this, what Christina's saying. But the question isn't really like as much will it be helpful to do this. I read this more as like, we've got a couple hours. How's our best way to prepare for this, knowing that we don't have 2 weeks?
Right. What's
I think that's really what the crux of the question is. Not like, would spending time talking about the cards be useful? Because the answer to that is yes, that is a useful thing. Would it be the most useful? I think, given that you're not going to have enough packs necessarily to play full sealed, what I actually might do is if you're already planning on going to pre-release, take the cards you got, and if you've got a couple friends, like if you're practicing for your team, try to build team sealeds with it afterwards. Mm-hmm. Like I think that's going to be the most useful thing you can do with those couple hours. And if you have time individually, which most people do at some point, look at the spoiler and try to figure out cards that you have questions about or you think are interesting. Like, you don't really need to like talk about the common black removal spell because look, this is a team sealed. You're going to put it in your deck, right? Yep. Like it's not going to be terrible, whatever it is. And I mean, if it costs 7 or something, then sure, don't play it. But like you wouldn't have needed to talk about Impale before the team sealed the rivals, right?
Right.
If you opened Impales, you would put them in your black deck. Mm-hmm. What you do want to talk about are cards like, going back to rivals, like cards with the city's blessing, or that even somewhat competent co-host or podcasters got wrong in their set review. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of like controversial cards. So I would spend the most time on those, but really I think just like building sealed is the best way to do it because you also get practice of you as a team. And I think that's very useful too.
Yeah, so try to keep those packs together if you can in some type of grouping so that you can reuse them. Or like you said, if you end up with a box or something, you can do that too. But yeah, good advice, Luis. Let's crack a pack.
Oh, yeah.
This one's Rivals of Ixalan, not Alpha. All right, what do I got? Legion Conquistador with a bullet, card that we like quite a bit.
Yeah, I like the Legion Conquistador. I mean, I'd be disappointed to first pick it, but it's a card that's on my range or on my radar to first pick, and that was not true. Like, coming into the format. Now
you mentioned this next one, Sea Legs, that you liked it quite a bit early on, like around the Pro Tour. Where are you at on it now? You still like it?
I do like it. I think you get it basically for free. I don't ever take it over anything, so I'm not like stressed about picking them up. But I do like the card.
Okay. Frilled Death Spitter. This is the 2 in a red 3/2 with Enrage. It does 2 damage to a player. Fine card.
I like the Conquistador more.
Same.
I think Death Spitter is fine though.
Yeah, put him in the arena. Who wins? Definitely Conquistador.
Well, the person with the Conquistador does take 2 damage.
That's true, and has like 3 cards in their hand. Guilt Grove Stalker.
So this is the 2/1 for 2. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. Card is very annoying because I also have a bunch of Sailor of Means in play. But
yeah. It's good for 8 damage.
But I would take the Conquistador. Look, the Conquistador bar has not been cleared yet.
Agreed. And Voracious Vampire is not going to be the one to do that either, although we have just cleared it. Waterknot. Boom.
Yes, there we go. Waterknot is one of the best commons. It's just a premier removal spell. Each common actually did a pretty good job of getting a premier removal spell. And yeah, Waterknot's it for blue, so I'm in for Waterknot.
Same. Gleaming
I'm still
Barrier.
Disappointed if this is my first pick, by the way.
Really? You think Waterknot is below the bar for where you'd want to, if you could mulligan a first pick or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, like you're trying to win the draft. You're not, if you're first picking a good common, it's slightly below average, not a ton below average, but it's still slightly below average because you are not taking, the bomb on commons are just so much better.
Yeah, the bomb on commons, and then of course the weighted the average gets thrown off by the insane rares too. Yeah. No, that's true. Strider Harness, really proven to be not a player in the format. Here's a good one: Jungleborn Pioneer, 2 and a green 2/2, and you get a 1/1 hexproof Merfolk token with it, but it's not as good as Waterknot.
No, definitely not.
Gruesome Fate. No. Uncommons.
This card anywhere.
No. Flood of what was that card you used to love? Gruesome Encore.
One? Oh, Gruesome Encore, yes.
Remember that?
Yeah, I do.
It's funny. I was looking at some pictures on my phone from when you and I were in the Community Cup together.
We were just talking about that yesterday at lunch.
Is that right? Yeah, 7 years ago, man.
This sounds like a good sign off. I'll save it for that because
Okay.
I have
All
a good
right,
story
yeah.
from there.
But I have a picture of you holding up some of those next to the Jester's cap, statue thing at Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, that's about right. Flood of Recollection, the blue sorcery. Return an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand and then exile Flood of Recollection.
Yeah,
I've never actually resolved this spell, though. I don't know. It feels like there might be some matchups or deck compositions where this actually wouldn't be the worst, but I just have never played it.
Yeah, I've never put it into my deck, even though, like you said, it's not like 0% that you would ever would, but it's
Right.
You'd have to have like tons and tons of removal spells.
Right. Next one. Now, this is an interesting one. This is Forerunner of the Legion, a 2 and a white 2/2. It's the Vampire Forerunner. Yeah. How do you think this matches up with Waterknot?
I think I would take the Forerunner. The Forerunner is pretty good. Mm-hmm. Like, it's close. I don't think it's like trivial.
Higher
but
upside. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that it ends up being a little bit better to take the Forerunner.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like if you have a Forerunner, especially pack one, pick one, and then you end up getting a bomb of some sort that's a vampire, you're just so much better off. Like, that upside's really high. And then it's a fine card on its own just to go get whatever your best vampire left in your library is. Next card is Aquatic Incursion, the 3 and a blue. Enchantment, you get 2/1/1 Merfolk with hexproof, and you can pay 3 and a blue to give target Merfolk unblockable until end of turn. I have not been impressed by this, man. I like the idea of having one card that makes 3 permanents, for Ascend purposes, but man, this thing stinks. I just have never found this card to be very powerful. I think it's pretty bad.
Yeah, there are decks that can lose to it, so I actually do like it as a sideboard card because look, as a Sailor of Bean scientist, you can end up losing to cards like this if you drag your whole game plan is to drag the game out really long.
Sure.
So
yeah,
I think that you have to keep that in mind. But yeah, this is not a particularly good card, and it's just so slow is the problem.
Yeah, totally. Super slow, super minimal board impact, and really expensive to activate. Not a big fan. Last card. It's our rare. It is Tillinolli's Summoner. 1 and a red, 1/1 with Ascend. Whenever it attacks, you can pay X and a red. If you do, you get that many 1/1 elemental creature tokens that are tapped and attacking. And if you have the City's Blessing, you don't have to exile them at the beginning of the next end step. If you don't. And you almost always do by the time you actually activate it, but in the case that you don't have it, they do end up going away.
Yeah,
Does this compete with Forerunner or Waterknot for you?
This card is good. I don't think it's a bad card. I would still take the Forerunner over it, but I wouldn't fault you for looking at Tillinolli's Summoner. I would take Waterknot over it as well.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to take Waterknot out of this pack myself. I want to be. That's where I want to be, man. I want to be in that color. I want to be in that ideal.
I don't think it's wrong to take Waterknot. I do like Black White a lot. I've been finding myself drafting that deck a lot, and just casting a Forerunner into like even a Sanctum Glorifier is pretty juicy.
Yeah, that actually does work out pretty well. All right, these are going in the package as well, and like I said, giving those away next week on the show. Okay, before we get into the sealed episode here, we've got a quick exclusive limited resources preview card for Masters 25.
Are these even exciting for you at this point? You just get the same one every time.
Oh, I'm so excited. Yeah, but this is the one, Luis. This is the one, buddy. This isn't like some actual cheap rip-off fabrication. We're talking about the real deal. Man of War. Yes, it is back, and they are putting it into Masters 25 at Common, so you're going to be able to just get in there and draft a whole bunch of Man of Wars.
Looks like a high-powered format.
Yes. One of the neat things, by the way, I don't know if you saw this, Luis, but have you seen that they put this watermark of like the original set symbol on each of the cards? That's pretty sweet, right? Visually, it just looks cool.
I'm going to reserve judgment till I see all the cards together. But I do think that looks cool, yes.
Yeah, it's like not overbearing, but it's pretty cool. Of course, Man of War originally printed in Visions with fantastic artwork by John J. Muth and some of the best flavor text ever written. This actually is my second favorite Man of War artwork, but it's 1A versus 1B
You like the Portal one the most. That's the one you have the original art for.
Yeah, that's my favorite one. Get that shark. But anyway, I'm stoked. I mean, the thing is, I love Man-O-War as a card and like as a concept, but the thing I really love about Man-O-War is playing it. It is an awesome kind of build around, or a kind of deck that if you can get multiples of, it can do some pretty cool stuff. And I'm hoping that ends up being something in Masters 25, because I have a real problem when it comes to passing Man-O-War.
Oh, yeah.
I think them taking it out of the Legacy Cube might have been one of the best things they could have done for me, because I always just took it. But anyway, what we're probably going to do, we've had a few people ask now that the spoilers are really rolling for Masters 25 about if we're going to do a set review for it. And I don't think we are. I think we're going to do what we normally do, which is what we call like a primer show. A show where we go over the format, we give you examples in more broad strokes about what the different archetypes are doing, or what the broad strategies are, and maybe highlight some of the cards within those strategies, rather than going card by card by card. Mainly just because whenever we've asked our listenership about how often they get to play these master sets, they're expensive, right? These are no joke to, it's not like you can just go down to the store and just draft it every day. They're out for a relatively short period of time, and they're very pricey. And so many of our listeners draft these sets between 0 and 1 time.
Yeah,
and
I would say the average is certainly less than 1.
Right. It's like 0.6 or 0.7 or something. Now, if you play online, and I think this is going to be online, right?
Yeah.
I'm assuming so. And if it is, then yeah, okay, maybe you can kind of run it up, or you don't care, you're just going to burn a bunch of tickets or whatever it is, and then that's a little bit different, and that is the part of our audience that suffers a little here. But, we have to pick and choose about where it's efficient to put our time and effort, and I think that a really solid middle ground is to do a primer show. So we're going to do one of those for Masters 25. And that way, if you do end up doing one of these, you're going to have some idea of what's going on. You're not going to sit down just with no clue what's up. But at the same time, us doing the whole set review process is a bit much.
Yeah, it's a long.
I also don't like doing it on reprint sets.
Yeah, it takes a really long time. I think that also the set review is more useful laying a foundation if you're going to draft it a bunch of times. If you're going to draft it once, I think an overview is actually more useful.
I think so too. Okay, so why don't we get into sealed deck? I've been doing a bunch of these, work research and such for the show, and I'm going to just dive right into it. So the first thing that you'll notice if you play a lot of sealed is that much like we've noticed for the draft format, is that the games can be very grindy and long. They absolutely can come to a screeching halt and have two players staring at each other with no really good attacks on a pretty well built out board. And you're going to need to be ahead on cards, or and some form of material advantage.
Some way to differentiate, your 3/3s and 4/4s from your opponents.
Exactly. And that's going to,
whether that's by having more of them or bigger.
Yes. And both of those do work. You can definitely work with the board states. It's just a matter of how do you want to go about winning. So the aggressive decks in this format, look, occasionally you are going to open up a pool that will demand that you play an aggressive deck, but generally speaking, they are dead. You can 2-drops lose value. You can go deep, splash colors, go big, just Uber it up, right? I mean, you can absolutely do all these things. And I think that is the correct way to play these formats as well. The removal in this block is good, right? I mean, you were talking about it earlier, Luis. You've got these removal spells kind of in all the colors. They cover all the bases, and a lot of it's about as unconditional as you get. Cards like Impale, cards like Luminous Bonds, Water Knot, all of these cards, they just say, okay, that thing you have is no longer relevant anymore, or it's dead. And that's a big deal.
Look at the commons that, like Impale, Water Knot, Luminous Bonds, all deal with basically anything.
Right.
Like, bombs included. And that's just not a feature that you always have in sets. And like going to the aggro part of it, this set already started out not very aggressive, so expecting it to go up from there is very difficult. Right,
and it in fact goes sharply down. And remember, in this format, you also get 2 packs of Ixalan, and so you've got things like like Contract Killing and Pious Interdiction. So kind of mirrors of what you see in Rivals of Ixalan as well. So lots of good removal, and you're probably going to end up playing a lot of it. Also, a significant number of it is splashable, specifically the white cards that we just mentioned as well. So you're going to want to go deep. So one way that I like to visualize this is imagine the game's playing out in a way where ground creatures of both small and medium size, so think 2 to 4 drops or so, are blanked for both players, meaning that they don't have profitable attacks for the most part. What cards matter in that case? How do you win the game? What are the types of cards and effects that you need to ensure victory? These are the questions that you start thinking,
Yeah, just assume both players are going to play like a sun-crested pterodon and a sailor of means.
Yes, that's perfect. That is the format. So if you envision that type of board state, you have to start asking yourself, how am I going to win? Like, I'm going to be doing that. You're going to be doing that. What's going to set me apart? So I've broken it down into a few major categories here. Bombs. These are relatively self-explanatory, but I will get into that. Well, I'm actually just going to go deep on all of these. Evasive threats, repeatable card advantage engines, and what I'm calling insurance plans, okay? You want inevitability. Clogging up the ground just isn't that hard in this format, and it's likely to get to that point, especially if both players think that they're the ones who are trying to build the control deck. So let's break these things down by each category. The first one is bombs. They're usually pretty self-explanatory, but I do want to get a little bit more specific here. We're talking specifically about bombs that are so powerful they often win the game single-handedly rather than just very powerful rare. Now, I want to make sure that I'm clear here. You do play all of these, of course, right? Very powerful rares are still awesome and you want them, but they're not necessarily reliable win conditions. And so you need to make sure that you're covering more than just very powerful. So cards that are fantastic in this regard are Tetzamach, Rekindling Phoenix, Hostage Taker, Vraska, right? These are cards that are extremely difficult to deal with and will win you the game on their own in many cases. They Hostage Taker, if you cast it, resolve it, and cast their card, it is very difficult for them to come back. If you have Vraska and she goes unchecked for 2 or 3 turns, the game's over. That's it. Tetzamach, we know what that card does.
It's also very hard to check Vraska.
Yes, exactly. And especially in the scenarios that we described, right? You got a chicken and a sailor, Vraska's going to be well protected there.
Tetzamach just got inducted into that limited Hall of Fame. I don't know if you read the Channel Fireball newsletter, but that was the news for this week.
Okay, congratulations, Tetzamach. But anyway, so these are the type of cards that you can rely on, generally speaking, to be those big win conditions. I've come up with a few examples of cards that are less along this lines and more in the still great, and you're always going to play them, but not necessarily the type of card that you say, I have this, I will win the game if I make it work. Cards like Galta, 12/12 Trampler. That dies to almost all of the hard removal in the set. So while it's still great and you're still going to play it, you also have to consider, if this is my game plan, if my whole deck revolves around casting Galta and winning with it, that very well may not work. Impale will kill it, it'll get Luminous Bonds or whatever, and you're like, well, now what am I going to do? And this stuff happens all the time, again, because there's so much removal. Itali, same thing. Big 6/6 with a huge advantage. It can easily die, you get no advantage, and then that's it. Direfleet Ravager going back, can be a card you can try to set up. Dreamcaller, Siren, Mavrin Fane. These are all very powerful, powerful to very powerful rares that you'll run, but that you can't necessarily rely on to just win you the game simply by casting them. So be cognizant of that. It doesn't determine whether you're going to run them in your deck. That's the thing. That's the takeaway. You, of course, are going to do that. But when you think about the game and how it's going to play out, if the board gets clogged up and both players have some number of removal spells, then how are you going to win? So that's the question we're trying to answer here. The next one
one clarification here, by the way. When you say play all of them, you don't mean that you necessarily get to put every single version of them in your deck. Like if you opened Tetzamach, Rekindling Phoenix, and Zetalpa, like a double white card.
Sure.
Yes, you might not get all 3 in. You might get all 3 in, but you also might not.
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, and I should have been more clear about that because I am an advocate for splashing pretty freely, and I'll talk about that. But I am saying you're going to play the ones that you can reliably cast. Yes, not that you're just going to jam every single copy of these into your deck. That is a good point.
Yeah, but the point does stand of like if you have some of these, like you have to have a very good reason to leave them in your sideboard.
Totally. Absolutely. The next category are evasive threats. Now, these are really interesting because these actually can be a way for you to win the game, even though they don't really seem like your most important cards. Like you might play Galta and they're like, kill it. But if you have, for example, the best one, Slippery Scoundrel, right, in particular, then, how do they interact with it? If you're patient with it, like don't run it out on turn 3 for the love of all things. Just wait until you have the City's Blessing, cast it. And your opponents are going to be looking at their 2/5s and 1/4s and their removal spells, and they're going to say, I don't have an answer for that thing. And you're going to start chipping away for 2 a game, and you're just going to sit there like, look, you have to answer this. There's a few cards in the whole set that do it. If you don't have one, you're going to lose to this, so you need to do something now, and you get to leverage the rest of it. Other cards that are less good but still fit a similar, sort of threat level are cards like Storm Sculptor. That's the 3/2 for 3 and a blue.
I actually love this card in Sealed.
Right. It's way better now. You get to pick up a creature that has been Luminous Bondsed or Water Knotted, and you have a legit threat that they now must use one of their removal spells on. Now, they often will have it, but you have enough of these things and they're going to run out and you're going to be able to use that. Soul of the Rapids, a fine one as well, because now you can use your removal spells to clear out their flyers and just start hitting them for 3, and their removal spells are dead and their ground game doesn't matter. Have all the 1/4s you want. I'm going to be hitting you for 3 in the air. Stormfleet Sprinters, similar. And then to an extent, any flyer. Right, like just anything, a Windstrider or whatever. Yeah,
like Kitesail Corsair is like the kind of card which I think you will play in your base blue decks more often than not. But we're ideally something like a Spirewinder goes up in value.
Exactly, Spirewinder is a good example. Yep.
Yeah, of like a mediocre card that becomes quite interesting once you get to the point at which you're playing Sealed and looking at having stalled boards and a lot of cards in play like. You can end up, I think, being pretty happy with that.
Yeah. Now, the next category of answering, again, the question, how am I going to actually win these games, is my favorite, and I believe it's yours as well, Luis. Repeatable card advantage engines, or even just repeatable advantage engines. Okay, these are a great way to dominate the late game with cards. Just flood, sometimes it's not literal cards, but usually it is. So, perfect example is Kumena's Awakening. 2 blue enchantment. Both players draw a card on your upkeep, but if you've got City's Blessing, then only you draw a card. You just play that card out after the board stalls, and your opponent just looks at their hand and like, crap. And now you start drawing 2 cards a game, and there's a decent chance that you're going to be able to just bury your opponent in card advantage. It's also difficult to interact with because it's an enchantment, and their Impale doesn't do anything against it.
More on that later, though.
Yes, indeed. Profane Procession. Right now, we all know how powerful this card is. It's even better in Sealed. This card is just completely unstoppable, again, because it's difficult to interact with, and it gives you a long-term advantage. Hadana's Climb can do that, too. Zakama. Now, Zakama is one that you might think, well, doesn't that just go in the bomb category? But it's actually different because Zakama, even if they use some of the enchantment-based removal on it, can still be activated turn after turn and let you generate repeated advantage with life gain, killing their creatures, or using the naturalize ability and
including knocking off the enchantment off itself.
Good point. Yes. And then of course Zakama is a good finisher as far as just being a huge creature as well. But again, repeatable. Another one that's a little more fragile but still quite good is Twilight Prophet. That's the 2/4 flying for 2 black. But if you've got the City's Blessing, you get to do the reverse Bob, right? You get to reveal a card from the top of your library on your upkeep, and you get to draw it, right? Which is
reverse Bob sounds like an evasive maneuver.
Yeah, but if you have the City's Blessing, you reveal the card and you put it in your hand, and then you get to drain your opponent for that card's converted mana cost. So interestingly, you don't even need to attack with it for the most part. It's only 2 power in the air, and you don't want to risk it to some Divine Verdict or something like that. You'll just win the game by sitting there and drawing cards and draining your opponent out. So that's another, great repeatable, again, source of card advantage. Immortal Sun, right? Draw 2 cards a turn. You get the idea. Both of the Huatlis are actually pretty good at this. The new one, lets you get an emblem pretty easily on a stalled out board that lets you draw cards every time you cast a creature. And you do play creatures in these decks, so you can use that as a big advantage as well. Vraska is another one that I talked about that's kind of in both. Here's one that's another really good example of this is Arch of Vraska, right? I mean, it's a colorless land, which is kind of a hit, but, you can use it to big card advantage late.
I think that's a perfect example of because a lot of the cards you're listing are also just bombs. Yes, if you open Profane Procession, you're going to play. It doesn't matter under what category you put it. But cards that have especially gone up in sealed, and you should really be inclined to play them: Arch of Vraska, Azor's Gateway, Conqueror's Galleon. Sunbird's Invocation. I would splash for Sunbird's Invocation and put a high priority of playing it. This is the 5 and a red enchantment. When you play a spell, look at the top X cards where X is the casting cost, and play a spell that costs X or less from that.
Mm-hmm. It costs less than X,
or less than X rather. Mm-hmm. And basically all your spells are kind of cascades, but for their casting cost.
Yeah, and you get to play them for free, and it doesn't deck you. It's really, really good. Yeah.
So those are the types of cards that. Everyone knows Hadana's Climb, and Immortal Sun are just great, and you're going to play them. But it's extra emphasizing that Arch of Vraska and Sunbird's Invocation and Conqueror's Galleon and even Search for Azcanta are the kind of cards that I'm a lot more attracted to in sealed than I would be in draft. Even though, let's be honest, I also like these cards in draft.
Yeah, for sure. Even cards like Vance's Blasting Cannons can meet this criteria. So keep an eye out for those type of cards because those end up being in my opinion, the best of these besides the ultra powerful bombs because of the fact that they're harder to interact with. The last one I have are what I'm calling insurance plans. It's kind of weird, but they can be really, really important. I'm just going to give you my example first so that you understand what I'm talking about. Recover. Right? Recover is incredibly powerful in this format because it lets you get your biggest bomb back and you're getting value. But even cards like March of the Drowned or Grim Captain's Calls you talked about a couple weeks ago, Luis, can be very good. And even cards like counter spells like Admiral's Order or Cancel can be good at protecting your long-term interests or stopping your opponent's bombs. And these are, cards that I think you wouldn't normally necessarily prioritize, although Recover sees quite a bit of playing draft as well. But these are ways, again, to give you that long-term approach, right? If you put a Recover in your deck, you can just do it for value on a Chupacabra or something. Or you can say, okay, I'm going to play this bomb. Maybe a good example would be one of the bombs that are not on that first list, but the second list, here's a Tali. And your opponent's like, cool, impale it. If you can buy it back at some point, and just put that much pressure on their removal spells, then the first time you finally get to start attacking with a Tali, the game, quickly snowballs back in your favor. So keep those type of longer term, narrower cards in mind. Even if they're a little slow for what you might want to be doing in draft, they can absolutely hold their own and give you sort of a pseudo version of the repeatable card advantage, kind of like a one shot of those, but for a really important card. To either protect it, stop your opponent from doing it, or getting your version of it back.
So what I want to emphasize for this sealed format is, yes, it's slower. That's kind of what we're talking about, and that's how a lot of sealed formats tend to be. Mm-hmm. But this category really touches on these games are going to be grinds. They're going to be games where you kind of go through all the cards in your deck. And your opponent's going to go through all the cards in their deck. And the game was necessarily going to come to decking, but it's going to be a really long and attrition-y game, more so than even just a normal slow format. And knowing that my bomb is this dinosaur, but I have a Grim Captain's Call that can get that back. That's really important. In having it so that you have backup plans for the bombs that you're looking to utilize it is really key.
Especially in for sealed pools where, you don't have multiple great bombs, right? Oftentimes you'll just have one, maybe two if you're lucky, where, getting that one card back can absolutely make the difference. I should also mention that, repeatable card advantage engines are where we want to be from the prior category. But look, if you don't have them or if you need to, you definitely play your just card draw spells too. I mean, those are, not repeatable. You're not getting an extra card every turn for the rest of the game, but you play your Secrets of the Golden City, you play your Pirate's Prize. These cards can absolutely do work for you, and you should absolutely be playing them because you need that kind of velocity to keep yourself going and keep hitting land drops and make sure that you can hang. So
I was going to say, not only are these cards good if you're blue, they're a reason to play blue.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So those are Luis recapped it nicely there. You know, you're looking for inevitability here. And so these are the places that I've been looking and finding that the kind of inevitability that I want. But the kind of glue that makes all of this stuff work is mana fixing, because if you're only limited to 2 colors, your approach is much different most of the time than what we're talking about. So mana fixing is a big deal. Playing multiple colors is very possible in these decks, but you should have a base color or maybe 2 from which to build kind of a defensive base, right? Like, you don't want to be 4 colors spread out evenly. It's much better if you're like base blue or base blue black, and then you're like, okay, well, I've got this green card I want to splash for, and then these 2 really good white removal spells, so that's going to be my deck. Something like that. Blue tends to be the best because you get treasure makers. Treasure makers, like the ones that we talked about before, primarily our old friend Sailor of Means, but you also get cards like Waterknot, which blue doesn't normally get, and that can easily lean you in that direction as their commons. But it doesn't have to be blue. You know, you can be black-white based or something like that. So the mana fixing looks like this. You get treasure from creatures or spells you'd already played. That's your best option, right? Sailor of Means being the all-star, but you get Prosperous Pirates, Contract Killing, etc. Those type of cards are all great. And those are the best option you have, because they let you develop your board while fixing your mana, while adding to your ascend count. They're just absolutely hit on multiple axes that you want to hit, and they can be really, really good, even enabling splashing for double-colored cards in that. But beyond that, you also have Evolving Wilds, Traveler's Amulet, the uncommon dual lands in Rivals, and then Unknown Shores in a pinch. I'm not a big fan of Unknown Shores, but if you do what you got to do, if you're splashing for a single color and you're sure that you can get a long game going, Unknown Shores can make the cut as well. And those are all colorless options or land-based options that you should look at. But like, I find myself running those uncommon duels like actually quite often, and I'm pretty happy to see them, where a lot of times they're kind of bricks in a sealed pool, or they're, you know, very niche case. If you happen to be green, you also get Thunderherd Migration and New Horizons. So you have really good mana fixing / mana ramp if you're in green as one of your base colors. Though I've found that I tend to have 2 of the 3 Esper colors as my base more often than green. I don't know why, but those are probably just because of the removal.
It just because those are the 3 colors that have the best common removal, and there is a good amount of fixing outside of green. So yeah, even when you're in the strategy of like, yeah, let's play all our bombs, it is not necessary to be green to do that. I also want to mention that the order in which I look at things in this format, or I look at the rares first to see what great cards are pulling me in any particular direction, and then I look at the fixing to see what I can get away with. Because if I can get away with playing a lot of, you know, colors, and then I certainly will.
Okay. Yeah, I know, I do the same thing, and I keep a little pile now next to everything else that's mana fixing, whether it's dual lands, whether it's amulets or whatever. I put all that stuff over there. Now, another big concept is that, you know, we talk about defensive speed here on the podcast, which is that if you're going to play a more controlling deck, you know, you want to be able to play things in the early game that matter so that you don't get ran over. That is dramatically less important than it is in normal formats, and even than it is in Booster Draft for this particular format. Specifically, 2-drops. We often talk about 2-drops as being kind of the cornerstone of the defensive speed, of the defensive speed of your deck, but they are way less important here than they normally would be. You can deprioritize 2-drops a lot more than I thought. I started like creeping in that direction, but thinking, no, I still need to hang on to these. I still need these. And then I just started playing fewer and fewer of them and felt like I could get away with it pretty consistently. So yeah, you can definitely deprioritize those. Basically, you want to look at it, each card, and take the quadrant theory. Okay, so quadrant theory, just to recap, is, you know, asking yourself, how good is this card in these 4 scenarios, right? When you're developing out your board, when the board's stalled, when you're ahead, and when you're behind. Okay, now normally we prioritize, like if we were to weight these, we would say when you're behind is the most important, when you're ahead is the least important. Okay, and then what you're going to do here is make some tweaks to the quadrant theory. Okay, so what you want to do is, you want to look at the quadrant theory, but heavily discount the developing, right? So when you're building out your board, and the ahead quadrants, which we already don't care that much about ahead, but even further down, while emphasizing parity when you're at a board stall. That's the quadrant that's actually the most important for this format, and you keep behind about where it always is. So we're kind of moving some things around. So imagine taking some weight away from developing in ahead and dumping it all on parity, because that happens way more often in this format than any format I can remember in recent memory. And that's a good way for you to conceptualize what you're trying to do here. If you do that, then you go, okay, well, if developing isn't that important, whether defensively or offensively, then 2-drops go down in value naturally. And things like evasive creatures, the huge bombs, which you're already going to play anyway, but the repeatable or even one-time card advantage goes up, because those are the cards that can help break parity. So if you have a question about a card or a concept or an idea or a color pair or a strategy, and you want to try to find out, well, what would it be best on average in the sealed pool, just run it through that quadrant 3, but adjust the weights, and you'll come out with your answer from there. This
is kind of interesting. We talk about quadrant 3 a lot, and I'd never thought about it in this perspective, but the quadrants aren't divided evenly in terms of importance. Like we all know that. Like, and I don't know how much we've implicitly stated it. And I don't think we've ever tried to put numbers on it.
No, we've never put numbers. We've always said that that being behind is the most important and ahead is the least, but we've never actually, we've never put a number on it or been specific. We can. Yeah,
I don't know what those numbers would be exactly, but that is a very interesting way to look at it. And I think that, I think
it is not 25 on each. No, that it is definitely not. Like it's more like you want to consider each of those things, but you don't want to weigh them all the same. So maybe we'll do that in a future show. We'll try to break it down by each of the formats or something like that. It's kind of interesting. Now, one of the things that I noticed that's specific to this format is that enchantment removal is of heightened importance. The cards that you can use to kill enchantments like Crushing Canopy, Cleansing Ray, Demystify, Slice and Twain, Naturalize. Here's a list of some of the cards that it kills, and you'll figure, just by me going over it, you'll be like, wow, those are all really important cards. Or most of them are. Argwell's Bloodfast, which is actually okay now. Baffling End, removal spell, right? Curious Obsession. Okay, that's a card. Hadana's Climb. We talked about that as just being a straight up bomb. Ixalan's Binding. Hard removal spell. Kumena's Awakening. That's one of the cards that fell into that repeating card advantage engine thing. Luminous Bonds. Mark of the Vampire to a point. Pious Interdiction. More removal. Profane Procession. Forget it. That game just ends if they get to untap with it or get to go unchecked. Search for Azcanta. Sunbird's Invocation, which we mentioned. Water Knot. I can keep going here, but these cards are really powerful cards in the format, and the ability to kill them is super important, to the point that I will now main deck Crushing Canopy. I have not main decked Cleansing Ray, Demystify. I probably would Slice and Twain, though I guess I just haven't really had one. Or Naturalize. But Crushing Canopy actually just hits on 2 axes that are really important, which is some of the bombs are big flyers or some of the important cards. Like here's a good way to put it. I made a list, right? Bombs, evasive threats, repeatable card advantage engine, and insurance plans. Well, Crushing Canopy hits 2 of those. So good. I'm willing to put it in my main deck and see if I can get something big with it there. So keep that in mind. You certainly want these cards pulled to the front of your sideboard for in-between games, but I've seen enough to know that you're going to see enough enchantments in most matchups that you're going to want to main deck them. And if you're a little bit short on playables in the colors that you've chosen, don't be afraid to throw a Naturalizer or a Slice and Twain in there or something like that.
Yeah, I think main deck and Crushing Canopy is not close to being close. It's just so good.
It's just so good.
I would play multiples in my main deck, and it's a card I actively want. Mm-hmm. I think that you can... I would definitely main deck Slice and Twain if I'm base green. I wouldn't main deck the straight kill and enchantment cards, but...
Demystify,
or Cleansing Ray, but any sort of disenchant effect that can hit multiple... Like Naturalize, for example, I think I would be inclined to main deck Naturalize. Because the other thing is, any good artifact that gets opened gets played.
Mm-hmm. That's it.
So you because it's colorless, so you're going to have targets for these cards.
Yes, you are. So play them; they're good. Now, what interesting thing that I found, is that many of my pools have a lot of color flexibility built into them. And what I mean by that is, I don't mean that I have a lot of color fixing. What I mean is that I have a lot of different options for my build. So in short, I often submit my deck and consider it the best first option rather than it being set in stone. If my opponent has a more assertive deck, they do exist, right? It's just not the norm, but they absolutely, people play like, oh, hey, I got a good vampire deck or a good whatever.
Yeah, then you can end up with an actual curve deck.
Yeah, you totally can. And I've had them and seen them. They do exist. This is still, a format that does that. Well, then I'll have a plan to change my deck dramatically to adapt to that, often switching out entire colors, reducing or changing my splashes, playing more early threats to quicken my defensive speed, that kind of thing. Now, my baseline is not this. My baseline is that I have this inevitability plan, this long-term game plan, this assumption that things are going to get gummed up. But you should have a plan for when you face this kind of deck, which in my admittedly small sample size was about 15 to 20% of the time. 1 out of 6, 1 out of 5, something like that. Decks are like, okay, I got a good 2-color deck. I'm not going to go for any splashes. I have a curve out style plan here. Because remember, this is still a tribal block that supports tribal synergies under some circumstances. And if your pool has the necessary tools for a good vampire, merfolk, pirate, or dinosaur deck, go ahead and do it. That's great. I have no problem with doing that. I think it's totally fine to do. But you also need to be prepared for them.
Yeah, I just do think that people are going to force that a little more than they want to. So we're giving you permission, but we're not saying you should go out and do this.
Agreed, yes. And I think that you should start out with your most powerful long-term game plan.
Like start out with your 3+ color bombs deck. But if a couple of your bombs are vampires and you have an actual good curve of vampires, then maybe think about it.
Right, totally agree. And look, here's the takeaways. The format is about raw power and inevitability, so you should build towards that. Try to include all of your most powerful spells if possible, and remember that the game is likely to go long, so you'll want answers to long-term threats like flyers, evasive creatures, recurring card advantage cards, big game-ending bombs, and you want to play as many of those as you can on your side. In a snapshot, be greedy, right? It's okay. Like we're telling you to be a little bit greedy. My advice would be to build about the greediest deck you can for your pool and then scale it back like a notch. You do still need to cast your spells. You still need to affect the board. You can't just do nothing. It's not like, we get that much, free reign. Imagine every game had a stalled out board and figure out how your deck is going to win through that. What if you sat down across from your opponent and you both just turned your deck face up to figure out who would win given the sum of all the cards? You just said, okay, you've got this. I'd use this to kill this, do that. You want your deck to win this fight. You'll remember back to when we had Mike Sigrist on the show, and he said that sometimes this is kind of how he envisions how the decks are going to play out, and he wants to always have all of his bases covered. This is the format where you're definitely rewarded for that type of mentality, so you should go towards that. It's really fun, too, by the way. Oh, yeah. You get these super long games and, lots of decisions. And a lot of times you'll look back and you'll be like, oh my God, if I would not have used my removal spell on that thing that I didn't really need to use my removal spell on, I might have had a better chance to win this game because now I'm out of removal and my opponent played a bomb and I don't have an answer for it. That kind of thing happens all the time. So it is pretty skill testing, I think, too. It's fun format, though.
Yeah, it's the kind of format that can be frustrating because some of the best bombs are just obscenely far above
so nasty. Yes.
The other ones. Like when your opponent profane processions or Tetsumax you, it's like, all right. But I do think that it's pretty fun that you have a lot of interlocking pieces, like trying to splash double color cards off your prosperous pirates that are making 2 treasures, or trying to figure out okay, I'm going to splash March of the Drowned because it gets back this card that is so critical to my game plan. And sideboarding is a treat. I think that it's worth mentioning sideboarding specifically because you end up in this format going really deep on bringing in extra ways to kill your enchantments, or boarding out your enchantments because they're bringing in ways to kill your enchantments, or switching colors because you're soft to whatever their main game plan was, and just back and forth with a lot of really intricate ways to combat your opponent's strategy. They have a lot of creatures where my creatures line up poorly against them. So I'm going to need to sideboard into a slightly different creature configuration, even though I think that my deck is pretty good the way it is right now.
Yeah, I love, and it really tests your overall strategic knowledge, right? Your skill at that, because you have to think long. I mean, like you kind of summed it up. The first time that I splashed for Recover in this format, I was like, okay, now I'm getting it.
Right.
now I know what's going on, right? Because that's not a card you'd normally splash for. But I'm starting to figure out how this format actually works. So anyway, get out there and play it. You can, try it out with your friends. You can get some sealed product and jam some games. I've mentioned it before, but one thing you can do if you're a little short on cash is, you can open up a pack and then sleeve it and then mark the sleeves like this is all from pack number 1, this is all from pack number 2, and just do that through. Now, it takes a little while to do it, but you're giving up some of your time for having reusable packs, because if you can, then jumble those packs up again and then open up 6 different ones, for your sealed pool, well, you're going to have a completely different sealed building experience and stuff. You can actually reuse those. It's just you have to put the work in up front to kind of label them so that you can reassemble the packs. And no, it doesn't count if you just say, well, I just put a big pile of rares and a big pile of uncommons, and I took 1, 3, and 11 commons and just rebuilt the packs. The collation is a thing. The way that the cards are printed and packed is a thing, and you don't want to do that, because you're going to have extremely weird pools where you have like all blue cards and no green cards or something like that, which is really unlikely to happen in a normal set of packs. So you do need to kind of reconstruct packs as they came out. But if you take the time to do it, that is a way you can kind of shortcut needing to just go buy packs after packs after packs if you're a little short on money.
Yeah, especially sealed does get pricey.
It does, yes. You're going through a lot of packs very quickly. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of the podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. First, I want to thank our sponsor, channelfireball.com. And, if you do this, especially if you end up just buying a couple of boxes and going right through them, you're going to end up with a pile of rares. Now, I give them away to the listeners because we love you guys, but we don't expect you to give them away to anybody. You can sell them back to channelfireball.com, and you're going to get 30% back if you want to trade them in for store credit. And this is a great way to practice, because you go through a box and you get a bunch of sealeds in with it, and then you take all those rares and you send them in, and boom, you've got a portion of a box, another box already paid for, coming back to you thanks to that 30% bonus on the trade-in. So that's one great way to do it. And we highly recommend that process, because it lets you play more Magic simply. It's just you can trade in your old decks to get more cards for new decks and not have to take that hit every single time you do it. That's channelfireball.com. If you want to find us on social media, Marshall_LR and Luis is LSV. Come say hi. We're always around. And on Twitter and Facebook and all these whatever social media places. That's going to do it for the show this week. We'll see you next time.
So I have good news and bad news.
What do you got?
The good news, or rather, we'll start with the bad news. The bad news is there was a writer's strike, and that delayed the Limmies this year.
It was a writer's strike that did it?
Yeah,
weird.
Yeah,
I just thought you forgot. Interesting. Okay.
No. The good news is we're going to have the belated Limmies. These are the Limited Resources
Limmies
Awards.
Are back. Yes.
The Limmies are back, and we are going to today present them. And because of the way the year broke down, the Limmies actually count. They're going by set. So Rivals of Ixalan is eligible, even though, and all the episodes, up until this point are eligible, even though these were technically in this year.
Okay.
All right. Well, let's just get started.
All right. Dive in.
The award for worst grade of the year goes to Comena's Awakening.
Oh, no.
We basically called it unplayable garbage, and now we're calling it a bomb rare.
Do you remember what we gave it?
That's a big swing.
I don't remember what we gave it.
I want to say like a D.
Okay, a D. Okay,
it's just oof. So the best grade of the year goes to River Herald's Boon. I feel like we were on River Herald's Boon train from day one.
Oh, yes.
And it did pan out. We've retired the tallest co-host category because it's not competitive. So we're replacing that with the hungriest co-host. That would be Luis.
Who won? Oh, you won it? Oh, my God. I don't know about that.
But honorable mention of Marshall.
Okay, I'll take it. Sure. I'm hungry right now.
The most embarrassing draft pick. This is a new category. It's moment of craving over ravenous chupacabra.
Come on, man! You just had to. You couldn't just let that sit. You haven't. You and everybody else hasn't got enough value out of that yet.
Sorry, this is a committee decision. The most improved format is Ixalan with the addition of rivals.
Really?
This went from a 2 out of 10 to like an 8 out of 10.
But what about Amonkhet?
The honorable mention is Amonkhet with Hour of Devastation. I think that Rivals plus Ixalan is a little better than Amonkhet plus Hour, and I think Amonkhet was a little better than Ixalan, so the delta is definitely smaller.
The delta's differently, yeah. But Hour peaked higher, right? Like Hour was like a 9 or a 10 on the would draft again
Maybe I actually
scale.
like Rivals more, I think, but they're both very, very good.
Yeah, that Sailor Means really has you. Anyway, go on.
The most valuable contributor of guests was TBS for his look in on the Alpha episode. That was awesome.
Oh yeah, and he also did a show with us when we were in Japan, I think. Yes, you were there. You were just completely unconscious. You said about 3 words the whole episode, but he was sitting right next to you.
All right, I believe you.
In my hotel room. Yes, I have a photograph to prove.
The most valuable contributor sign-ups was Ben S. He's a frequent nominee in this category. Him and Shahar really just kind of pass the trophy back and forth.
They really do, yeah.
The most valuable episode was the Look Back, my anniversary episode, which I forgot to write the actual number of. But
yeah, that was a really fun one. You wait, that one most valuable episode?
Yeah, of course. Because it had links to so many episodes that it's like it had 30 episodes worth of value in it. It's pretty hard to beat the multiplicative factor there.
Yeah, that was episode 422.
All right. The best card name I think goes to Ravenous Chupacabra. Actually, there's a Photoshop version of that where the Chupacabra's fat, and that's the Chalupacabra. It's mostly used to bully me on Twitter.
I like that.
The sweetest build-around goes to Zakama Primal Calamity because this 9-drop Naya Dino is frequently played alongside islands.
Absolutely.
And I like that.
That's great.
The most disappointing build-around goes to Shorekeeper. This is the 1-mana 0/3 from Ixalan where you can pay 8 mana to sack it and draw 3 because when this card was spoiled, it seemed like this could be a thing. And it turned out
I wanted it to be a thing, Luis.
Yes.
So wait a minute, but it is official though. Shorekeeper won a Limmy.
Yes, Shorekeeper did win a Limmy.
Okay, so that's probably Shorekeeper's greatest accomplishment.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's kind of like the Razzies, but the Razzies combined with the Emmys, like in one, or the Oscars or whatever, in one category, in one award. Limmy's versatile. It does well in Quadrant Theory. Sweetest archetype goes to the Sailor Means decks.
Yeah.
With the honorable mention going to the blue-green-black cycling deck and Hour of Devastation. So these are pretty much neck and neck, both the format and the sweet deck within them.
Mm-hmm. I like the winner here. I like that, yeah. A well-earned Limmy.
The worst archetype goes to Dino Ramp in Triple Ixalan. I think that this looked like a thing. It was like, hey, dinos, here's a tribe, and it's just horrendous. If you try to draft Dino Ramp, you were just generally going to get stomped. And, of course, closing, as usual, the best mana ward. That's Mana War. Goes to Angler Drake, the 6-mana 4/4 from Hour of Devastation. I mean, this was a Mana War like no other. Better than even the actual Mana War. So...
Wait a minute, that's not true. Come on.
Which one would you rather have in your average limited deck?
Mana War.
I think you'd rather have Angler Drake.
Come on. How many times? You always get to cast Mana War. You don't always get to cast Angler Drake.
In any case, Mana War's not eligible maybe next year. So I guess it was actually an Iconic Masters, I think. So anyways, those are your 2017 Limmies. Next year there'll be more on time, and
it's only March.
We will see you next week.